Hey guys, Argent here. So it was requested that I do some character profiles and other videos on Dune. I had kind of been holding off because I wanted to think about some of these for a bit, because Dune is probably the series I'm the biggest nerd on. It and Evangelion are probably the two series I kind of excessively read the most about. Also, Dune is really weird and really hard to kind of psychoanalyze a lot of the characters just because of the way it's written. Um, it's just the characters kind of act in a very abnormal way in the book, and they don't really always interact like normal people do because Frank Herbert's a really, really strange man. And this really comes across in his greatest creation. So the first character profile is going to be Paul Atreides, aka Paul Muad'Dib, aka the Emperor of the Known Universe. Spoiler alert. Um, so Paul, what can you say about Paul? He's the main character of the first two books in the Dune series, Dune and Dune Messiah. We see Paul is the only son or the only sorry, he was the only offspring. His sister was born after the Duke's death. He's the only son of Duke Leto Atreides, one of the most beloved aristocrats in the known universe within the Imperium. Um, Paul was raised from a young age to be a mentat and to be a duke. A mentat is a human computer. So he was trained to be a mentat. He was trained in by the greatest weapon masters in the galaxy. He was taught the Atreides traits of honor, loyalty, etc. At the same time, though, I think Paul's great problem is he doesn't have a clearly defined sense of self. And you may be noticing that this is a theme I have in a lot of these books, particularly with heroes, where I attribute their primary problem to not having a defined sense of self. Paul doesn't really have his own moral code. He doesn't really have his own desires. He doesn't really have his own ethics. He doesn't really have an ability to really act in behalf of himself. He doesn't have wants. He just more or less has what other people set up for him, and that could be due to the way he was raised. It could be to breeding, or it could be to some just the way he is. But if we look at Paul's life, he never really expresses much of a want for anything. The only thing he really ever wants is Cheney. In the end, he can't bring himself to marry her and just keeps her as his concubine. All the things he set out to achieve are things that other people wanted from him. He wanted to turn Arrakis into a blue planet in honor of Liet Kynes. He wanted to be Emperor of the Known Universe, even though he really hated the idea, because he saw it as advancing the interests of House Atreides, and because he had a vision that did it. He willingly, in Dune Messiah, we see him incapable of dealing with the conspiracy against him, of being unwilling to deal with the conspiracy against him, of not really caring when Princess Irulan was drugging Cheney, etc. We see him just kind of indifferent to a lot of things that would make normal people have some sort of emotional response. And I think Paul is fundamentally kind of an empty person. He was raised to be a weapon, basically. He was raised to be a mentat, and I think that really says a lot about him as a character. Mentats aren't really supposed to act in their own interest. Mentats are specifically designed to be trained and then to go in and do things for other people. They're designed to compute possibilities. They're not designed to make moral judgments. They're not designed to want things for themselves. They, in a very real sense, become as much machine as man, despite not formally being augmented. And I think that's kind of what Paul is. He was designed by his father and mother to be a weapon, to be a living weapon. I mean, that's kind of what the Bene Gesserit bred him to be. a living human weapon whose purpose was to dominate the universe. And he arrived a generation early, but at the same time, that's just kind of what he is. He wound up being the Kwisatz Haderach, showing up early, but he was designed to dominate the universe, and he did. So I suppose, in the end, that's just what Paul is. He's a weapon. He was created as a weapon, he was raised as a weapon, and he was used as a weapon by the people around him. What I think the point he's trying that Frank Herbert was trying to make with the character was how dangerous that much power can be in one man's hands. Paul is just a weapon without intentionality, and people keep pointing him at different groups, be it the Bene Gesserit pointing him at the Old Imperium, be it the Fremen pointing him at the Harkonnens, be it his father pointing him towards power. People just keep pointing him, and whatever he puts his mind to, he will achieve. And it's strange because it really depends on which version of Dune we're looking at. Because whether or not Paul had an ultimate plan is an interesting question. He doesn't really seem as much in the original. They take a slightly different perspective of it in the TV shows. And in the prequels, we're introduced to a complete other side. So he's kind of an enigma. Was his whole goal to oppress the universe, to wage brutal jihad, to disgust people at what unlimited absolute power can do, that the universe would come to value freedom more? Was that his goal? To be a necessary evil to change the perspective of the universe? Was he just doing what he thought was showing loyalty to his Fremen, of bringing the wealth of the universe to them and giving them a just reward for services rendered? Was he just a man who was completely trapped and controlled by the futures that he saw, and was ultimately too weak to try to move against them, believing as he was that they could not be changed? It's an interesting question, and one I doubt we'll really know. Paul is strange because Frank Herbert doesn't really portray him as much of a heroic figure. He just kind of portrays him as a warlord who achieves power. The movies tend to portray him as a great hero fighting against the forces of darkness to save the universe. And the prequel books kind of show him somewhere in between these two things as a very complex figure. So I guess that's kind of my issue with Paul and why he's kind of difficult to do a character profile on. Because we can't really be sure who the real Paul is. And I guess that's what I was kind of getting at. He is very much like Daenerys Targaryen, like Harry Potter, a reflection of whatever character is talking to him. He's a reflection of whoever's attempting to manipulate him. And perhaps there's a point to that. Perhaps that's just the literary nature of a messianic character. That they don't have a sense of a self. They are just a receptacle for the dreams of others. And I think to some extent that's the idea of what a monarch is and should be. That the nation surrenders their collective will to them and their collective dreams to them. And in return, that person embodies them. And perhaps characters like Paul, like Daenerys, etc., are meant to be a kind of a satire of that, or kind of a looking at it from the looking glass darkly, from the opposite side of it. But anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on Paul. He's a very hard character to psychoanalyze because there's so many different versions of him. And there's so many contradictory aspects to him. There's the honorable Paul, there's the brutal Paul, there's the loving, there's the man who loves Chani, there's the man who's cold to Irulan, there's the man who respects his mother, there's the man who despises his mother. he's really just broken. And I guess to some extent, the fact that he does have some humanity left just represents the human wreckage that everybody has created in their struggle for control of the universe. I will leave you with a quote from Jorah Mormont in Game of Thrones. Um, the peasants and the small folk are content to let nobles play their Game of Thrones so long as they are left alone. They never are. This is Argent Templar signing out.